now.
So it's an honor to introduce Hugo Tobar. Because of my background in psychiatric hospital, I knew it's hard to see beyond what we see. And there is a lot what we cannot see from the outside. I knew immediately that's what I'm looking for. A 21st century tool to get access to stress beyond what we can see. It gave possibilities to release stress in a deep manner, and he developed many courses, to me gateways, and to me it's a gift personally, and I think it's a gift for the world. It's a gift to get access to stress in all kinds of systems, and he develops many courses, and I'm proud to be part of the NKC. That's it. So Hugo, good luck.
Thank you, Yolanda. Okay, so I'll get to introduce Yolanda for the next talk. She's doing the next talk. So anyway, so thank you, everyone, and thank you for coming to listen to me today. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge Daria from Kiev for her concept and idea for this conference. And when we decided to do it, and having been through, and the whole world's been through what it's been through since last March with all lockdowns and pandemics and all this kind of thing, I knew I had to do something different. And we did the lockdown webinar series, and even the extended lockdown webinar series. And you never know, we might have to do, we're still in lockdown webinar series. And so when I thought about what I wanted to do something about immunity, but something that's a little bit different. And so that's why I decided to do this talk on balancing immunity through the chakra and meridian system. Because, you know, as kinesiologists, often we're working with the body's anatomy and physiology. But we're also working with the human energy systems as well. So I thought I would do a talk where I'm showing you how to address immunity through the different systems. So we'll be looking at the immune system, both the specific and innate immune systems. But also I'll look at the chakra system, and specifically the major and the minor chakras. And we'll be looking at those ones that are associated with the immune system. And then we'll be looking also at the meridian system as well. And there'll be some main meridians, and also I want to look at the defensive chi, or the wei chi, which is also connected to the immune system. So with the immune system, in the innate immune system, we have natural killer cells, neutrophils, monocytes, macrophages, and of course, basophils, eosinophils, and mast cells. And so we'll look at, you know, I'll give some background on all of these, and so that'll help us when we're working with the energetics, we can understand how we could be affecting the different parts of the innate and specific immune system. Then we'll also be looking at the specific immune system, and that'll be specifically the T cells and the B cells and the dendritic cells as well. Okay. So with the specific immune system, like the other part of the immune system, all the cells are formed in the bone marrow. So we'll get to see that the bone marrow is quite important. Then we have the antigen-presenting cells, and that's specifically the dendritic cells and the memory B cells mainly, but there's always other ones that do that as well. Then we have the T killer cells and the T helper cells, and then the B cells, mainly the memory B cells and the B plasma cells. So let's have a look at how the adaptive immune system or the specific immune system works. So you can see here I've got two pictures side by side, and these pictures, actually what they show you is the two parts of the specific immune system. So on the left, what you have is the whole part where you've got, basically the role is to activate B plasma cells to produce free antibody against a specific pathogen. And on the right, we've got all how the specific immune system activates T killer cells to kill altered self cells that need to be eliminated. So both sides start with the antigen presenting cell. So on the left, you can see you've got the pathogen here, this little yellow thing there, and here is the pathogen. And the first cell that comes in contact is the antigen presenting cell. So on the left here, the antigen presenting cell is actually a B memory cell. And on the right here, it's a dendritic cell. So the B memory cell will find the pathogen floating in the blood. And on the right, the dendritic cell will find the pathogen in your tissue. And so the first thing it does is the antigen presenting cell has to recognize that there's a pathogen. So this is usually a bacteria or a virus. And you can see that it actually, it swallows it. Munch, 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 yum, yum, yum. And it breaks it up into little pieces inside. Now, the B cell's got its immunoglobulin on the membrane. And when it sits on the membrane, if it recognizes it, it will only recognize one pathogen. So it's very specific for that pathogen. That's why they call it the specific immune system. Now, after it's digested the pathogen, it then puts a piece of it on this special molecule, this red molecule here. And you can see they both have this red molecule. It's a special molecule that only antigen presenting cells have. And this is the MHC class 2. So then what it has to do, it actually has to find a T helper cell. So here you can see this is the T helper cell here, and this is it over here. So then when that happens, the T helper cell has this special receptor called the T cell receptor. And the T cell receptor then, it like the other part of the immunoglobulin up here is specific for the pathogen. So this T helper cell will only recognize this specific pathogen. So once they have this co-activation, they activate each other. They have the T helper cell then releases hormones called cytokines.
И следующим шагом вот эти Т-клетки-помощники выделяют цитокины.
And the cytokines are represented by these yellow dots, so they're hormones. And then what happens is you get this proliferation and they reproduce and differentiation, they reproduce themselves. And so so the B memory cell then can switch to B plasma cells and other B memory cells, and they all produce immunoglobulin specific for this pathogen and this pathogen alone. And over here, once the T helper cell is activated by the dendritic cell, what happens is the T helper cell will then switch to other T helper cells and T killer cells, and then you get the T killer cells will then kill infected cells. They're usually either virus infected cells or cancer cells as well they can kill. And here's a pretty cool picture of the T killer, cytotoxic T cells, another name for T killer cell. You can see it locks in by recognizing the pathogen and then sends these enzymes and hormones in, and they kill the cell. And here you have a T killer cell killing a cancer cell. And similar thing, it just gets in there, injects the enzymes and hormones and kills it. So just to summarize, what's important for the specific immune system is that you have B cells, T cells, and dendritic cells. And the B cell system will get a pathogen that's floating in the blood. And the T killer cell system will get either, infected tissue or cancer cells. So it actually works in your tissue. Then we have the innate immune system. Again, all cells are formed in the bone marrow. But we have natural killer cells and the other list of cells that I spoke about earlier. But now I'm going to go through each type and just talk about how each one is involved in different immune responses. So first of all, we've got natural killer cells. Great picture, eh? I saw this picture, I thought, oh, that's so cool. And again, they're like the T killer cells, is that they kill virus-infected cells and cancer cells. And they have so they do the same thing as the T killer cells, and they're both killer cells, And the only difference is that T killer cells will be specific for one pathogen and one pathogen alone. And whereas the natural killer cells, they're not specific for a pathogen, so they will, any virus infected cell they could potentially get. Next ones are the neutrophils. They're involved with the inflammation. They're the first cells at the site of inflammation. And they activate macrophages into their pro-inflammatory state. They release all kinds of hormones. They're also phagocytes, so they munch up the bad guys as well. And the other thing they do is that they can release some enzymes with antimicrobial properties, so they can certainly work against different pathogens. So there's a cool picture of a neutrophil. Monocytes. So monocytes can differentiate into either macrophages or dendritic cells. So as macrophages, they only differentiate into macrophages when there is an inflammatory response. And dendritic cells are the antigen-presenting cells that we spoke about before. So they're part of the adaptive immune system, but they come from the monocytes. And so there's a cool picture of a monocyte. So macrophages. So there's been two types of macrophages, depending on which system you follow. So you've got the so-called monocyte-derived macrophages. So they're the ones that actually convert from monocytes into macrophages when there's an inflammation. And then you've got the tissue-resident macrophages. So these macrophages are actually formed in fetal life from the yolk sac or the fetal liver. And they actually self-renew in the tissue. So they go to the tissue and they wait there for that tissue to have an inflammatory response. And the other model is the M1, M2 model. And again, as we'll see, the M1, like the monocyte-derived macrophages, are active when there's inflammation, and the M2, like the tissue-resident macrophages, they're active when there's a resolution of inflammation or you're coming out of the inflammatory response. So looking at this, you can see that normally in your tissue, you've got these tissue-resident macrophages, which are the TRMs, sitting there, hanging out in your tissue, just like, you know, hanging out. And but when there's injury or inflammation, the monocyte-derived macrophages, these red ones, they come in and they handle the inflammatory response, and they release all the pro-inflammatory cytokines, or all the hormones and all the things that happen when you've got the inflammatory response. Then what happens when you go into the resolution phase? So what should happen then is that we come out of inflammation. And this is when the tissue-resident macrophages become active. And the monocyte ones, monocyte-derived ones, they either die or they convert to the same as the tissue-resident macrophages. You know, they come and blend in and say, oh, I want to do resolution instead of inflammation. So in inflammation, what happens normally is you should get you get an inflammatory trigger, inflammation comes on, and then it should resolve and go away. But when you have chronic inflammation, the resolution phase doesn't take place, so then you get this chronic inflammation happening. And this is the basis of a lot of disease states. So when you have the resolution phase, you have anti-inflammatory hormones, you have growth factors, hormones that help repair. And you get these other things called the specialized pro-resolving mediators, or the SPMs. And they're involved with the resolution, and they're derived from fatty acids. Mainly omega-3, and that's why people say have your omega-3s, make sure you get your good omegas. Okay, and there is a couple that are from arachidonic acid, which is omega-6, that's the lipoxins. So the macrophages are also phagocytes, so they eat, swallow, and poop pathogens.
Итак, они поедают, поглощают и выделяют патогены.
So I just thought I'd show you a couple of examples of this. As you can see that phagocyte going on, yum, 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 munch, 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 munching things up and going around and eating tasty morsels. Here in Australia, it's dinner time. Probably have to get takeaway delivered. Here's another one.
Вот еще один.
Oh, yum. Oh, my God. Those green ones, they're candida. Yeah. Oh, yum. Nothing like it. Good dose of candida for dinner, eh? Munch, munch. Okay. So basophils are next. So they're involved in allergies, and their role is to induce inflammation. And it's when they're overactivated is when you get an allergic response. And they specifically release things like histamine and serotonin and heparin, which is all involved with the inflammation inducing. And they're very active in things like anaphylaxis, asthma, atopic dermatitis, and hay fever, which is a common problem. And there's a cool picture of a basophil. Then you've got eosinophils. So they're helping the fight against things like viruses, worms, and parasites. And also involved a little bit in the allergies and asthma as well. Another cool pictures, eh? I reckon they're awesome. Then we've got mast cells. Again, they're very famous for being involved in allergies and anaphylaxis. They're involved in part of the immune defense against parasites, wound healing, and blood-brain barrier integrity. So here's a little diagram of how mast cells are activated within an allergic response such as hay fever. Okay. And you can see that you get the immunoglobulin E binds into the mast cells, and when they recognize the pollen, they degranulate all the histamine and other things that cause all the symptoms of hay fever, which is the inducement of inflammation, actually. So let's look about the cell formation. So all immune cells are formed in the bone marrow. All immune cells mature in the bone marrow except for T cells, which mature in the thymus. So you can see here's a picture, you know, you get, there's quite a few bones in the body that produce bone marrow, but not every bone does. And so this shows you how the cells are formed. So you have this initial cell, which they call the pluripotent stem cell. And then depending on which hormones work on it, you can either get the myeloid line or the lymphoid line. So you can see over here on the lymphoid line, you've got the natural killer cell, or you get the T cell and B cell. Where over here, you've got different lines. Not all of them are involved with the immune system. So you've got the red blood cell, which is erythrocyte, or you've got the megakaryocyte, which produces the platelets. Then you've got the mast cell. Then over here, you've got the line that produces all the other ones, the basophil, neutrophil, eosinophil, monocyte, which then can be a macrophage or a dendritic cell. This then goes to some important organs. Then we've got the thymus as well as the bone marrow, where the T cells mature. Then you've got the maturation of the T cells. And you can see here, you get the two lines developing, the blue line, which is the T killer cell, and the pink line, which is the T helper cell. You've got the spleen. So the spleen filters the blood, and so if there's any like pathogen recognized in the blood, an immune response can take place in the spleen. And then you've got the lymphatic system. So this is where you get all the rest of the immune responses taking place. So now that we've looked at all those interesting things about the immune system, we are here to talk about chakras, right? So some of the chakras we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at the heart chakra.
Рассмотрим сердечную чакру,
which is associated with the thymus gland. So we know that the thymus gland is where the T cells mature. We've got the thymus chakra, which is to do with the T, connected to T helper cells. And we've got the spleen chakra, which is connected to the spleen. And we've got the joint chakras, which is connected to the bone marrow and lymphatic organs. And so when we look at chakras, they're part of our energetic anatomy. And so this triangle I've developed, the treatment triangle, is actually about the energetic structures, anatomy and physiology and psychology, and they're all interrelated. So if we, in kinesiology, we make an intervention through our energetic structures, through chakras and meridians, we can affect anatomy, physiology and our psychology. So here are the chakras. And what are chakras? So chakras, people call them energy centers. They're places where people can exchange energy, like you can exchange energy between people. And so like this, we can, when we're communicating, for example, we exchange energy through the throat chakra. Okay. They can also transduce energy between the different planes or layers. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about those chakras I mentioned before. So first of all, there's the heart chakra.
Итак, начнем с сердечной чакры.
So the heart chakra is about unconditional love. And when you love someone unconditionally, you connect with them, you know, you accept them for how they are without any conditions. So when we look at about how chakras, how we exchange energy through chakras, so the yin aspect of a chakra is how you receive that energy from someone else. And so when we have the yin aspect, we, you know, when it's under energy, we don't feel accepted. And when it's over energy, we are obsessed with being accepted. And the yang is about how you can accept others or accept yourself. So, you know, when you think about the thymus and the T cell maturation, you know, when the T cells go wrong, that's when you get autoimmune disease. Okay. And so that you can see how, you know, if I hate myself, I attack myself. So the thymus chakra, you can see here, is situated just above the heart chakra. There, it's not in this picture, but it's just above the heart chakra. And over here is the spleen chakra. So the thymus chakra is connected to the T helper cells. So the T helper cells will be involved with, so the thymus chakra is about helping. Can you give or receive help? Are you open to people helping you? Are you able to help another? And so they're connected to the T, you know, with the T helper cells, you've got the cytokines and antigen presenting cells. And you can see you get this interaction between the antigen presenting cell and the T helper cell. So then we're looking at the spleen chakra. So this is about prana or vitality. But it's the solar prana, so it's about the vitality in the yang essence. So it's about being confident in that the male part of yourself, like the ability to provide or defend. And then we've got the different joint chakras, and they're to do with the bones. So, you know, with the hips, it's about being strong, but being strong is also being a good leader, and it's also knowing when you need to be led by someone else, or you need to do the leading. You need to have the leadership skills for yourself. The knees are about being flexible. The shoulders are about supporting, giving and receiving support, and the elbows about relationships and personal space. So these, on a physical level, are going to be connected to the bones and the lymph organs, and so, you know, that'll be about the ability to produce the cells you need for an immune response, and also having a place where you can have an immune response. Now, looking at the meridians. So the first one we need to look at is triple heater, and this is connected to 3 endocrine systems. So the thymus, thyroid, and adrenals. And so obviously the thymus is where we're going to have our T cells mature. So, you know, if we want to work against our immune response, and the thymus produces T killer cells that kill virus infected cells, we could need to work with a triple heater meridian. Then we have the spleen pancreas meridian, which is connected to 2 glands. You've got the spleen and the immune system, or the pancreas. And so obviously the whole, it's about the whole, generally the whole immune system. So, you know, if you've got immune issues or infections, you know, the spleen meridian is somewhere where you may want to work. Okay. So then we've got the defensive chi. And this is the more superficial chi that keeps out the pathogenic factors. And these pathogenic factors are, you know, they are the pathogenic states of chi. And so these 3 types of meridians are important for that. So you've got the superficial connecting channels, you've got the muscle meridians, and you've got the low channels, which I don't have pictures of. So when we're doing our kinesiology, you can work, I've put the general immune format from NK in there. So you can check the chakras. So you've got the heart chakra, thymus, spleen, and the joint chakras.
И также здесь мы можем проверить меридианы. Здесь мы рассматриваем... Can I have the slide again? I need to finish. И здесь мы рассматриваем меридианы тройного обогревателя, селезенки, мышц и соединяющие каналы.
So that's the end of my talk. So I'll just look in the Q&A if we've got any questions. Can't see any really. I'll just look in the chat if there's any questions. Okay, people are just asking, so we'll stop the recording.